Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renee King. I am the Federal Women's Program Manager in the Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity, also known as EOPO here at Goddard. I would like to welcome you to an important event today that commemorates Women's Equality Day, which celebrates the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States and highlights the valiant woman of the vote, featuring our keynote speaker today, Codsi. Again, I truly welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. Also, I would like to invite you to provide us with feedback in the survey link at the end of the program. But before I close, in the spirit of unity, we here at Goddard continue to affirm unity by recognizing the goal of the NASA Unity Campaign to power and propel NASA organizations and people to focus and work together effectively to accomplish NASA's mission. Please look for more information in the coming weeks because NASA Unity begins with you. So without further ado, please welcome the Women's Advisory Committee Chair, Jennifer Neptune. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Hello, everyone. As chair of Goddard's Women's Advisory Committee, I'm excited to welcome you to this keynote address recognizing Women's Equality Day. In 1973, Congress designated the 26th of August Women's Equality Day to commemorate the certification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. In 1920, Tennessee became the final state needed to ratify the amendment, and the decades-long movement by persistent and courageous women finally paid off. Today, we celebrate 100 years of the valiant women of the vote in the United States. The 19th Amendment reads, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation." While the 19th Amendment gave white women the right to vote, minority women weren't guaranteed that same right. Black, Asian, Hispanic, and Native women weren't fully empowered to vote until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The right to vote is powerful, and while this constitutional right gives us a national electoral vote, it is just as important women use their voices every day. The Women's Advisory Committee wishes to highlight the power of voting, not just in local and national elections. We also vote at the conference room table, in meetings, and in any instance where a decision is being made. Women make up roughly 51% of the population, and these days it's rare that a decision is being made without a woman in the room. We encourage women to remain valiant over the next 100 years and to continue the work toward equal representation in decision-making by entering male-dominated careers, particularly STEM fields, by using your voice when an informed decision is being made, and by bringing value of diverse perspectives to the conversation. This recognition of the need for women to remain valiant for the next 100 years brought Ms. Codsi to our attention. When looking for examples of women defining what it means to remain valiant, who inspire courage, and who are setting the bar for global participation of women in decision-making, few women operate at the level and with the passion of Ms. Codsi. It is a great honor for the Women's Advisory Committee to be able to bring her to you today. To introduce Ms. Codsi, it's my privilege to present Dr. Christyl Johnson, Goddard Space Flight Center's Deputy Director for Technical Research Investments and the Women's Advisory Committee Executive Senior Champion. Dr. Johnson is no stranger to being valiant or encouraging women to use their voice. She leads the charge of inspiration for girls and women at events like Goddard's own Girls Night In and the Sustaining Women in STEM Roundtable. She is recognized as a global influencer at events like the United Nations Women Global Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship Industry Forum, and earlier this year at Women in Tech 24-Hour World Tour, as well as other highly visible and prestigious events. She inspires us regularly, and the Women's Advisory Committee is honored to call her our friend and ally. Please welcome Dr. Christyl Johnson.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I am so happy to have been asked to be the champion for the Women's Advisory Committee at Goddard Space Flight Center. I'll tell you, Jennifer is new in this role, and this committee is taking on a whole new shape for the women at Goddard Space Flight Center, and for all of those interested in working towards equality, women equality across the whole agency. This is something that we can all get very, very excited about. We're really taking different approaches going forward to actually move the needle, coming up with creative solutions, innovative activities, and all kinds of things to be able to reach our youth, to reach the early career women, and to have partnerships between the early career women and the women who are more seasoned and who are towards the end of their careers, doing mentoring and all kinds of other activities. So I'm very, very happy and honored that you asked me to be the champion of this Women's Advisory Committee. And I'm very, very excited about where we're going to be going in the future. I'm very excited about that. So anyone that wants to join this Women's Advisory Committee, especially those of you who are at Goddard Space Flight Center, we're looking for you to join our effort to move the needle in this area. So thank you for that. Now I have this extreme honor to introduce our keynote speaker here. I've had the pleasure of working with Caroline for many years now, working towards this passion that both of us have towards improving conditions for women across the globe. Caroline is a passionate and strategic leader who has had successful career in the corporate world for over 25 years in positions like vice president and senior vice president in major organizations. The great thing about Caroline is she founded Women in Governance in 2010. And that's a not-for-profit organization with the mission to encourage women to develop their leadership, advance their careers, and access executive roles and board seats. And as we know, it's not a trivial thing to have more women in these corporate 500 board positions. And so this is something that is a focus of her not-for-profit organization. The Women in Governance programs have a deep and concrete impact for gender parity through major global events, mentoring programs, and governance training. It also, as an organization, it helps other organizations, including male-dominated industries like ours, close the gender gap in the workplace through its unique parity certification. And she's going to tell us a little bit about this certification a little bit later on. So I would say that a highly sought after speaker, she's addressed audiences across Canada and as well as internationally on the issues of gender parity. Believing firmly in the importance of giving back to her community, she has played an important role in many boards and committees and has received numerous prestigious national and international awards. She is recognized as one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women, top 75 Canadian immigrants, and top 20 diversity leading figures in Quebec. She is also the recipient of a Gender Equality Award by the United Nations Women's Committee, a leadership award from Quebec's Federation of Chambers of Commerce, and Quebec Business Women Association, as well as leaders of a decade for Diversity and Inclusion Award from New Delhi's Women Economic Forum, and that's just to name a few. So it is my complete honor and pleasure to welcome my friend, Carolyn Codsi.
Good afternoon. My name is Codsi. I am the president and founder of Women in Governance. It's a nonprofit organization for the advancement of women. We want women to develop their leadership, to advance their careers, and access board seats and decision-making bodies. A little bit of background about who I am and why I've decided to create this organization 10 years ago today. I was born in Beirut in Lebanon. I was 7 years old when the war started in Lebanon, the civil war, and it lasted 15 years, so up until I was 22 years old. During these 15 years of war, I have gone through a lot of struggles and a lot of, I would say, more than discomfort, fear and anxiety. But how best to be able to expand your leadership than to come out of your comfort zone? And when you have to discover these things at a very young age, it becomes a second nature. So at age 17, I actually left my country without parents, without money, and I moved to Paris. These were, I would say, wonderful years where I discovered freedom, where I discovered security in a certain way, because at the same time, I was a girl, young girl alone in a foreign country. These are the years, the most formative years of my existence. This is the time where I learned to be brave, courageous, to overcome my fears, and I have to say to learn how to be resilient. At age 22, I moved to Canada. This was actually the second time for me moving to Canada because I did come here between the ages of 11 and 15 with my parents, then went back to Lebanon. And at 22, I came back as an adult. I was already married with my first husband, French husband. Came to Canada with a very strong feeling that this country was all about equality at every level and in every sector. And I have to say that I was a little bit disappointed as my career was progressing. I made it very quickly into directorship roles, into vice president roles, and even as my last job, I was executive vice president of Canada's largest medical expertise firm. This is when I discovered how very few women made it to the top. Women who had graduated with me decades earlier seemed to be stuck halfway somehow. And I thought it was very odd because in my case, not having a very strong network when I came to Canada, having gone through so much struggles, I thought that it would be harder for me to actually advance my career. And then I realized that the things that I went through during the Civil War actually benefited me. I had this very strong determination, lots of ambition, and I didn't grow up to see there was a difference between boys and girls, not because I was in a culture that was progressive, far from that, as you can imagine. Lebanon is a country where women, not only do they not make it to the top, but there's not even half of the women that actually have jobs. But I would say more because I was not in a culture that would be very surrounding. I was alone in Paris for a long time. I had to make a head of my own. And I decided that I was just as good as any man and that I was going to make it to the top like just any guy would. I think that this was probably one of the most important element in my ascension is not to let any bias or any of what society's strong, how can I put this, elements. You know, society will tell little girls that they are not ready for certain disciplines, that they are not made to be top leaders. I didn't have any of that. I did not have any surrounding of people telling me what I could be or not be. It all came from within. So being so convinced that I could make it to the top actually allowed me to progress without sticky floors, without glass ceilings. So after 20 years in the corporate world and looking around me and realizing that there was such a huge lack of women, I started asking myself, first of all, what were the root causes of that shortage and whether people were aware of the situation or not. And I quickly realized, I mean, think of 2010, that was the time that I launched Women in Governance. And in 2009, I was starting to do all the research. And then I realized that there were a lot of obstacles that were self-imposed by women. They very often felt that they were not ready for the job. They were reluctant to take on bigger responsibilities because they felt that they were maybe an imposter, that they were not as good as people thought that they were. They had difficulty overcoming their fears and wanted to be perfect before accepting a role. I must say, I never felt any of these things. I was always very confident, maybe overconfident. I bulldozered my way through, I guess, in an elegant fashion, I think, because I always made sure that the people around me were very, felt safe. And I think that's extremely important, especially when you're in a leader role, that you're not being a bulldozer with your team or with your colleagues. After realizing that through the research that I had done, there was only 5% of corporate CEOs in Canada that were female. After realizing at the time that only 12% of board seats were occupied by women, I thought there had something to be done. Something had to be done. So I, at that time, decided that I was going to launch a group of women, like-minded women, to talk about these issues. Never did I think that I was founding Women in Governance, that it was going to become a global organization for the advancement of women. But hey, you have to dream big. So at that time, I invited some women to talk about the situation, and like-minded women who were ambitious and wanted to sit on boards very quickly had 150 plus confirmations of women who wanted to attend. This is when Women in Governance actually saw the day. So 150 women showed up. I invited everyone to a boys club, a club that usually was only reserved for men, and decided that they were going to open their doors to women and change their rules. And from there, we became very active in terms of sensitizing the general population about the situation, encouraging women to develop their leadership, encouraging men also to become male allies, to become champions of gender parity, because we're never going to attain our objectives on our own. We need to work at it together, women and men. Sensitizing also governments, because there are legislations in certain countries in Europe, namely the Scandinavian countries and also France, where women have been given a chance on boards because those companies had no other choice. So some people can be for or against quotas, and that's a whole different discussion that we could have. But I was feeling that that was something necessary. So I worked with a deputy in France to learn more about what they did in France to achieve their targets. It's not something that we were able to replicate in Canada, unfortunately. And this is when I thought that if we were able here in Canada to have something else on the legislation, something that is going to be encouraging organizations to do the right thing, to have more women on their boards, at the executive committee, in every field and in every industry, then we would attain our objectives. At that time, it had been about 7 years that Women in Governance was in existence. I went to see McKinsey & Company, the largest consulting firm in the world, to talk about the importance of seeing organizations change some of their policies, their initiatives, the way that they were trying to close the gender gap in their workplace. McKinsey & Company thought that this was a brilliant idea and that they wanted to support this, and they did so for 4 years pro bono, and we created a parity certification, which is the logo that you see right behind me. And, because mentoring women is extremely important, and we've been doing it for 10 years. We mentor women at every level, professional level, executive level. We encourage them to be bold. We encourage them to take their career in their own hands, to overcome certain difficulties that they may have, even around life-work balance. That's one of the biggest obstacles that women tend to have. They have so much to do at home with the children and with the chores, and have husbands that often will tend to let them deal with all of that. Research demonstrates that up to 2020, we still have 2 to 3 times the chores that are incumbent to women versus men. And the pandemic has demonstrated that even further. So while we are mentoring women, while we are giving them training, governance training, and all sorts of other leadership development training, we realized that sending them back into organizations that had been built by men for men was not the solution, that it was extremely important that while they were working on themselves to be ready for their next challenge, their next role, well, organizations needed to also modify their structure to allow these women to progress. This has been hugely successful across Canada and now the United States. And we're extremely conscious of the fact that there is not one thing that needs to be done, but several things that need to be done. So working on supporting the women, working on getting male allies, working on government legislation, and of course, working on corporations and making them realize where the gaps are. Because how can you actually have an impact on a gender gap when you've never measured it, you don't understand its root causes, and you don't have a clear roadmap towards parity? So the importance, I think, of my talk today with NASA, for which I'm more than honored to be here today, is to encourage women who are in all disciplines, including male-dominated disciplines, to realize how their potential can only be completely fulfilled if they go towards the end of their dreams and their goals. And they have to be ambitious dreams and goals. And quite frankly, I have to say that just speaking to the women of NASA today and the men of NASA, because I know that there are a lot of men that are also listening today, you are among the lucky women who have decided that a STEM role is something that you can do. Too often, from the age of 5 years old, little girls are already told that they are not made for scientific disciplines. So I commend you, all of the women here, including those that are in more administrative roles, because you are in a male-dominated industry, just being in the industry that you're in today. I just congratulate you for your efforts. And I think it's key that you in turn attract other young women by talking in schools, by talking in having blogs and talking on social media about the importance of having more women join NASA. And I'm extremely excited to see all the advancement that we've seen recently and the articles that have come out about women in space, including women of color. I also want to share quickly some of my experience in the STEM sector. First of all, it's experiencing a labor shortage. It's a field that is bound to experience strong growth over the next few years. Obviously, with the pandemic, that has been amplified. And there are many opportunities that are available for high quality jobs. Despite this, there are still not enough women that are in the sector. Part of the solution to meet the growing recruitment needs, not only because they can fill positions, but they can also ensure a diversity of experience and points of view. So women are key at every level of every organization, not only women, but also diversity as a whole. People of diverse backgrounds, people of diverse origins, sexual orientation, age groups as well. My work in the past decade with women in governance has been mainly around bringing women in the boardroom, as I mentioned earlier. But I've put a large emphasis on women in STEM over the past, I would say, 2 to 3 years. And this is actually how I was fortunate enough to meet Dr. Christyl Johnson of NASA. We were both in Paris speaking at a Women in Tech panel. And here we are today. So I've done a lot of research, and the first thing that came out and that was striking to me is that actually the tech sector and the STEM fields in general, for a long time were actually female dominated. And I have a very interesting story that I'd like to share with you about information technology pioneers. One of the first one is a British woman. Her name is Dame Vera Stephanie Shirley, and her nickname was Steve. In the 1950s, she worked at the Post Office Research Station, building computers from scratch and writing code in machine language. She took evening classes for 6 years to obtain an honors degree in mathematics. She founded, with a capital of £6, a software company that became an empire. Having experienced sexism in her workplace, being fondled, being pushed against the wall, these are examples that she gave, she wanted to create job opportunities for young mothers and predominantly employed women. She only had 3 male programmers in the first 300 staff. She also adopted the name Steve to help her in the male-dominated business world. Given that company letters using her real name were not responded to, she chose that nickname Steve, and that changed everything in the way that she launched her business. Women were working from home, and they enjoyed the flexibility, the opportunity to grow that was offered to them. And Shirley came up with a very creative idea to cover the noise of children playing or crying in the background. She was playing tapes with sounds of typewriters while they were on the phone with clients. So Steve, or Shirley's company, grew exponentially, and her team's projects included programming Concorde's black box flight recorder. So it's very exciting to see that throughout the 19th and early 20th century and up to World War II, computer programming was predominantly made by women. But it's actually when men started coming into the field that women started getting out of the field. In the 1960s, the proportion of women in computing and mathematical professions in the US was 27%, peaking at 35% in 1990. In Canada, despite an increase in women with STEM degrees, the proportion of women working in these fields advanced by 2% over almost 30 years. Women comprised 20% of the STEM workforce in 1987 and 22% in 2015. But why? On average, about half of young women expressed an interest in the STEM fields at an early age. However, only 19% earned computer science degrees. Grades are not the issue here. Globally, girls perform just as well, or maybe even a little bit better than boys in their school subjects. Instead, implicit and explicit gender bias plays a large role, partly perpetuated by the social expectations of parents, teachers, and employers. So there's no denying that the lack of visible female role models, toys, women in TV series, films, and the media. Recall James Damore. He was previously at Google, and he was claiming that there was a biological reason for a lack of female computer scientists. Or Wikipedia not having an article about scientist Donna Strickland until after she won a Nobel Prize for Physics. The leaky pipeline is what often depicts women passively leaking out of STEM careers with no discussion why those leaks occur. But in fact, the cracks and gaps caused by non-inclusive environments are a major cause to the leak. So the focus has to move from fixing the women to fixing the environment. It is well documented that women who do pursue STEM careers tend to experience either being ignored during meetings or paid less overall for their work. I know it's not the case at NASA, but these are statistics that are interesting to share. And also overall, dealing with mansplaining. I get that on social media all the time. Or heap-eating, meaning when a woman has an idea, it's only retained when a man actually repeats that idea. So in a nutshell, I think that I could talk for hours about this topic that is a passion to me. I've always been extremely vocal about the importance of female leadership. People find it quite interesting that it's a Lebanese woman moving into Canada who has become one of the main beacons for gender parity in this country. But I have to say progress in Canada and in the US can no longer wait. It is up to us, the women, the men, who are working together progressively towards these goals to keep at it And my team and myself, I have a team that works day in, day out, pandemic or not, to change things, to have an impact. And the pace of change has actually never been this fast, yet it will never be this slow again. We will be worse off with status quo. So we need to continue at it despite the pandemic, despite the things that are going on that are negatively impacting women. We are talking about a recession that is impacting women way more than it is impacting men. And this is why at Women in Governance, we think this situation is unacceptable, that the gaps that we still see in every field are unacceptable, and we are working at making a difference. We are women and men working together to achieve gender parity in Canada, in the US, and around the globe. Thank you.
I love being a woman. I love the tenderness, the sensitivity, the uniqueness of what it really means to be a woman.
Que, independente de raça, de cor, de etnia, de crespo, de liso, mulher merece respeito. Mulher.
En tant que femme, je peux faire quelque chose pour que le monde change demain.
I am your daughter, your wife and a mother. I am your sister, I am your lover. I am no quitter, I am a fighter. I want the power that you took away from me.
Avoir un enfant handicapé, c'est la preuve, pour moi, de l'amour infini des mères. Cet enfant ne me regarde pas souvent, ne m'embrasse pas, et je l'aime.
I can do anything now that I've had a baby. I have produced a human being. I am superwoman.
एक हस्बैंड अपनी वाइफ के ऊपर एसिड से वार करता है। ये कहाँ की ये संस्था है?
I'm no longer gonna be quiet because it's embarrassing.
Ben savaşçı bir kadınım. 向上的女人 a feminist.
Batalhadora.
She's a man. Exigente.
Жизнерадостная.
Динамичная.
Веселая.
Libre.
Parfois, je dérange, je dis que même Dieu devrait être une femme.
Alors, ce que j'ai trouvé assez difficile, finalement, dans mon parcours de carrière, quand j'étais plus jeune, c'était de voir que très souvent, des hommes moins compétents que moi, et je le dis en toute humilité, accédaient à des postes plus importants que le mien. Et au début, je trouvais ça un petit peu décourageant et injuste. Et finalement, j'ai décidé de tout simplement foncer, de les observer aussi. Qu'est-ce qu'ils faisaient, eux? Qu'est-ce qu'ils faisaient pour réussir comme ça? Et sans adopter des comportements masculins, pour autant, j'ai fait quelques changements dans ma façon de me comporter face à un patron, face à des collègues, etc., d'apprendre à m'imposer, à avoir une voix autour de la table, à faire passer mes idées, de manière à ce qu'elles soient retenues, de manière à ce que je puisse être à la tête de projets importants, etc. Et finalement, à ce qu'on ne voit plus que je suis une femme et que donc, peut-être que je n'ai pas tout ce qu'il faut, parce que trop souvent, en tant que femme, on doit se prouver doublement avant de réussir à obtenir le poste. Et je vais vous dire, une de mes plus grandes fiertés, c'est quand j'ai quitté mon dernier poste de vice-présidente exécutive de la plus grosse firme d'expertise médicale au Canada, le chef des finances qui quittait l'entreprise en même temps que moi a dévoilé mon salaire au comité exécutif. Je ne sais pas pourquoi il a fait ça, mais le plus drôle, c'est que, comme c'était principalement des hommes sur le comité exécutif, ils ont découvert que j'étais la mieux payée. Et ça a fait un scandale épouvantable, alors qu'il faut bien qu'il y ait quelqu'un qui soit le mieux payé. Mais là, c'était la femme qui était le mieux payée. Alors, je me suis dit que finalement, j'avais bien réussi à jouer mes cartes. Je ne savais pas que j'étais la mieux payée. J'étais heureuse de l'apprendre en quittant.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for those wonderful words of inspiration and also for the information that's going to be so critical for us to pay attention to and for us to use some of those things as tools for us to make progress. I took a couple of notes during your talk. a couple of things that stood out to me. Encourage them to be bold, thinking about the kids of the future. We need a systematic approach to gender parity, and that's something that we believe is very important. That's why we do our Sustaining Women in STEM Roundtable at Goddard. The only way to succeed is to go to the end of your dreams. I love that statement, so thank you for that. And you said think big, and that's something we like to do at NASA, period, thinking big. And then the last thing that I wrote down is focus on, or actually focus away from fixing women to fixing the environment. And the two words that you said were mansplaining and heap-eating. I had never heard of heap-eating before, but it's happened to all of us as women. So that's great to have a term now to associate with it. So thank you for that. So now we've had so many people that have been very anxious to ask you some questions, and we had people in social media to actually vote on the questions so that we could see which questions were the ones that the most people had an interest in hearing you address. So I am going to read to you the question that had the most votes that everyone wants to hear about and hear your response to first. So the first question, what strategies do you suggest for bringing about change in the workplace when, first of all, white males dominate leadership positions and don't truly understand what gender inequity is, their position of privilege, and the non-white male experience in a workplace they perceive as fair and unbiased? When, part number 3, when you would like to help develop true parity without being labeled a feminazi or worse, losing your job?
Well, to begin with, thank you so much for that great introduction, Christyl. It's so lovely to be with you once again.
Once again.
Yes. So first of all, bias by definition is unconscious. So people who have bias, and you and I, we have bias as well, right? It's not just the white men who have bias. Right. We all do. We all tend to have our own perception of reality. So bias is a situation that we are all facing in our workplace. Obviously, certain workplaces are even more filled with bias than others. There's a lot of work to do, and I really think that it starts with communication. Everyone wants to do the right thing. Everyone understands what's fairness, what's equality. But sometimes if the conversations are not deep enough, the perception of what equality is might be erroneous. So it is important to actually put it on the agenda. It is not just an item at the bottom of the agenda. If we end up talking about this, then fine. No, it's something that needs to be central, and the conversation needs to encompass everyone, not just, targeting certain men and saying, hey, you sit down, let me explain to you what unconscious bias is. Everybody needs to work at it together. And I think one of the key elements is to explain to these people that we're talking to about the danger of unconscious bias, is to explain to them why it is important to have a very inclusive workplace. What is the impact for the organization, for its financial performance, for its employee engagement, for its branding and reputation, and the results for everybody will see it differently. Some will say, well, it's ethics, it's fairness. Women are 51% of the population, so let's be fair. But others won't have something like this resonating. They will need something that is more financial, numbers on papers, that demonstrates that when women and men are working together to resolve a problem, to advance a company's strategy, to be more innovative, to be into more markets, to be to have new market segments, then they realize that when women and men are working together, the results are actually better. The ideas are actually more robust. So it's in everybody's interest. We're not doing this for women. We're doing this for society, for the economy, for the strength of our organizations. So I think coming at it from that angle, and very important, you were mentioning something in the question. The person was saying, I believe, not to be seen as I can't remember how you put it, female Nazi or feminazi, yes, or to lose their job. I think there are ways of demanding equality. I think there are constructive and peaceful ways of bringing about change, rather than just demanding. And sometimes, I think it's super important to be bold. I always say it, ask for what you want, be very deliberate, be very clear, be very demanding. But you have to know how to ask.
Yes.
Otherwise,
that's very.
If you're seen as the enemy, we're not getting anywhere. If you're seen as wanting to do this together, men and women holding hands, wanting to change the organization, the society, etc., this is where you will succeed.
That's awesome. Thank you. And one of the points that you made about the unconscious bias training, it's so important. What we have learned within NASA is the unconscious bias experiential training goes a long way. So you're actually going through examples where you're in classes with both men and women and a very diverse classroom, but you're going through experiences together, which actually brings to life so many different examples that you wouldn't have really thought about before. And it just kind of makes you think real time while you're going through it in the class. So that's been very, very helpful for us.
Well, exactly. Right. And if, nobody is comfortable when a man interrupts a woman or when a man repeats a woman's idea. I mean, the man often doesn't even realize what he just did. So I think a conversation and open communication will allow, first of all, realizing what these men are doing, but also if we have male allies who will be the best ones to say, hey, Harry, didn't Sally just say this? And perfect. For sure, bring results, because then there's an open, eyes will open, no doubt. And what has been seen cannot be unseen.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So the next question, what advice would you give to mid-career professional women who are paid substantially less than their male counterparts?
Well, obviously the gender wage gap is one of the biggest issues to reaching equality, because, they say that the future is female. We're going to need that full paycheck for the future to actually be female. So there's a few things. First of all, what we see is that women tend to negotiate much less than men do. Women are usually happy that they got the promotion or they got the job, and they don't realize that don't wait for your new boss or your current boss to tell you, hey, I got you an 8% raise, a 12%, whatever it's going to be. You have to ask for it. So every head of every department has a budget that they manage, right? So this is the budget that I have for 2021 salary increases. The way that it's going to be distributed is not always fair. It is often those that are demanding a salary raise, those that are showcasing their work, saying, listen, I've done this, I've done that. This is what I deserve. I've also looked, done some benchmarking in terms of what my value is on the market. And this is where I land. And this is far from what I'm actually making now. These conversations need to take place. And women and young women who have just recently graduated and get into their first job tend to just accept a job without negotiating. The boys, the men, will negotiate. They'll negotiate throughout their whole career. Women are also too often, less focused on the financial aspect of it. So, if you put money aside, think of the number of years. On a career of 35 years, on average, women will have to work 8 more years for the same job as the men, just to compensate. So if you think that it doesn't matter, 7% salary increase, but then compute that year over year. So it does matter. It's extremely important to be well documented and to have a conversation, a very open conversation on your expectations. I used to mentor a wonderful young woman in a very large global cosmetics company. And one day we were having lunch and she came very disappointed. She said, I can't believe there was a promotion. I was sure they were going to tap on my shoulder and offer me that job. And it actually went to this other guy. and he's not as good as me. He hasn't done as much as me. He doesn't work as hard as me. And I said, why are you telling me? Did you tell the supervisor of that job that you would be the right person? I'm pretty sure he was knocking on that supervisor's door and saying, hey, I heard there's an upcoming promotion. I'm the guy for you.
Yeah,
definitely need to be very vocal about our expectations.
Absolutely. Okay, the next one. Many parents of school-age children are really struggling to keep up with work responsibilities while simultaneously assisting children with distance learning. While not always the case, caregiving responsibilities disproportionately fall to women, and you mentioned that, who may need to transition to lower profile jobs or go on extended leave without pay in order to manage these caregiving duties. This pandemic could be devastating for millennial women in the workforce. What efforts do you suggest management make to retain talented workers who happen to be caregivers and ensure that there are no long-term effects on promotion opportunities and wage gaps? What advice do you have for women trying to balance and maintain sanity? Wow.
Well, there are three levels of change that must be made, or awareness at the very least. Well, first of all, the organization. We mentioned, what does an organization need to do to retain these women? So obviously flexibility is key. And I think the pandemic has brought a whole new level of flexibility and agility to all organizations. I mean, they've had to adapt to the situation, and all of a sudden, things that a lot of organizations might have frowned upon, like working from home, has become widely spread. Everybody, most people are working from home right now when you're in an office space. But so there's the organization that needs to adapt. There's the woman herself who needs to adapt to that reality. But the woman also needs to put some of the responsibility on her partner. It takes two people to have a child. Mothers have been disproportionately impacted during COVID. We've seen a lot of women actually taking time off because they couldn't handle work and taking care of the kids and doing homeschooling while their husbands were busy working as well. But it takes two to tango. You can't be on your own with the children while your husband says, oh, I'm in a meeting. You can't disturb me. It doesn't work that way. So women need to let go of, sometimes we're too control freaks. You know, we're trying, everything needs to be perfect. The children need to be, wearing matching socks and everything it doesn't matter. We need to let go. Certain things are not as important. Yes, your husband can cook. It doesn't matter if it's Kraft dinner cheese once in a while. You have to be ready to share responsibility and encourage your partner to share the load. Now, the husbands or same-sex partner, whatever it is, but the other person who's dealing less with the children needs to recognize the importance of their involvement for the whole functioning of the family. If there's two people working, it's only fair that there's also two people who are taking care of the kids. Now, the newer generation apparently is much more ready to share the burden. If I can call burden, children are not a burden, but you know what I'm saying. So there was an article where they were talking about the importance of and the uprise of men taking care of their kids. But that new generation of men needs to start doing the dishes and cleaning the house as well. They're not doing that. They're starting to recognize the importance of taking care of the kids. So there's a lot on our shoulders. And I think it's everyone working together. If the organization can do their part, if the father, the mother, but it's key that we don't give up on our careers, because I mean, I have grown children. So obviously, I've passed that. I have a stepdaughter who's 14. So I'm back sort of in the teen years as well. But it's key that we don't forget the importance of our careers, our, financial autonomy, our independence, our time for ourselves, our development. And that is actually going to be good for our families. Christyl, children who are raised with parents who are both very busy and both working actually end up being better mothers and better fathers when the time comes, because they see both their parents being involved, and the girls who grow up seeing their mothers work will be more ambitious, will want a career. The little boys who see their fathers involved at home and with their children and in the kitchen will also be involved in their family life when they become fathers. So it's in everyone's interest, really.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, the next question. What evidence would you give men who assert there is no gender gap?
Well, there is no gender gap. Well, I would say women are 51% of the population. They are 60% of university graduates. They are 80% of buying decision-making. They buy the house, they buy the car, they buy everything in the house. Yet, they are 5% of CEOs of the top 500 companies. They are barely 21% of board members. They're actually, in Canada, a third of board of publicly traded companies that don't even have one woman on their board.
Wow.
So, you know, I find it quite insulting if anybody says, and it happens all the time, people who say, what are you talking about? We are in a gender equal world. There has been a survey here in Canada where they were asking people on the street, do you feel we've reached equality? And people were saying yes, at I think 90-some%.
Wow.
Well, in the meantime, if you look at what the World Economic Forum says in Davos, they are talking about the year 2200 to reach gender equality in Canada, 180 years to have gender equality in Canada. We're not talking about the Middle East or Africa, we're talking about Canada. And the United States is about the same. So it's funny how people have this impression, they think that there is equality and we're so far from it. So it's very dangerous because then they don't understand why there's so much emphasis and so much efforts around bringing more women to the leadership teams. But it is key, and we need to continue to build a sustainable pipeline of female talent. And you know, I'm really concerned when I see women leaving the workforce because they can't handle taking care of the kids and the work and all that they have to do during COVID days. And then they're going to tell us we can't find the women, but we have the women. They're out there. They are going through mentoring programs. They're going through governance trainings. They're highly educated. They're ambitious. They want to contribute. They're not always as visible as the men who are currently on boards are. And they sometimes need an extra push because they think that they're not ready when they actually are more than ready, sometimes more ready than the men. But the men, they don't care. They just, you know, you give them an opportunity, they're going to dive in, and good for them. And so should they, but so should we as well.
Exactly. Okay, so how can we better collaborate with male allies and those who are aware of inequities and willing to help to achieve equity in the workplace?
Male allies are key. We are never going to attain our objectives if we are doing activities, events, writing blogs, doing conferences for women, by women, amongst women. We need men in the conversation. They actually want to help. They actually want to contribute to the conversation. They often don't know how, and sometimes they are shy because they feel that maybe this is not their place and they don't want to be seen as mansplaining or intervening in an area where they're not welcome. So it is very key that we are super deliberate in our intentions of having them be part of us, be part of our movement. At Women in Governance, we have a male and a female co-chair of our board. So the woman is Monique Leroux. She used to be the CEO of Desjardins, one of Canada's largest financial institution. She sits on a ton of boards globally, including Standard & Poor's in New York, Michelin in France, and a number of other very prestigious boards. So she co-chairs with Norman Steinberg. He's a lawyer. He used to be chairman of Norton Rose, one of the world's largest law firm. And then working together, again, goes in the same vein as what I was saying before. Robustness of decision-making, the best innovation, the best ideas, because they have different perspectives. And together they will come up with the best solution. Men feel they have a role to play. They don't know how. Yeah. So when you identify a man who speaks intelligently about parity, about gender equality, you need to be all over that person and tell them to go get his friends. Because when it comes out of the mouth of a male CEO, it is even more powerful than when it comes out of the mouth of a woman who might come across as doing something that is self-serving, or as you mentioned earlier, some people might find that pushy, etc. So together, when you're on stage with a man and both are talking with the same tone, with the same intentionality, and that both understand that it's in everyone's interest, and this is when we succeed.
All right, great. Okay, so we have just a couple minutes left, and I have two questions for you. So one of them is, how do you personally respond to overt misogyny in the workplace?
Well, misogyny, workplace, misogyny on the street, misogyny in the supermarket. I mean, that happens all the time. And it's very hard to react in a polite and elegant way, but it's important. Because if you come across as angry and bitter, then you're sort of cultivating that myth, that misogynistic myth that, women are emotional, or women are angry, or feminist, and as if that was a bad word. I mean, a feminist, what is a feminist? A feminist it could be a man as well. A feminist is not only a woman. A feminist is a person who believes in gender equality at every level, social, economic, political. So it's very important to, I said it several times before in our discussion, communication. So when somebody comes at you with a very misogynistic remark, he probably doesn't even realize the impact of what he's saying. And, having a smart conversation, you always feel like it, right? You want to say, you're an idiot, and you want to move away. But in the workplace, it's kind of hard. If it's a colleague of yours, you're going to see them again and again and again. So it is an opportunity for a constructive conversation. It's an opportunity to take someone who has very different views from yours, to bring them to the bright side and to make them realize the situation. So it's not easy. It's not fast. Right. But it's important to never let anything go, because if we let it go once, twice, 3 times, it becomes okay. So every time something happens, or you're a witness, maybe something happens in front of you and you see it, to get involved. I've done that before. I've seen things that shocked me where I went and said, excuse me, do you even realize what you just said? Can we just pause and talk about it for a minute? And the other person is sometimes, thinking, oh dear, what's going to happen now? And then realize that nothing bad happens. Only good can come out of it. Now, you could land on someone who's completely, a lost case, but I doubt one of your coworkers would be in that situation. They need to be saved.
Exactly. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing yourself with us today. It has been wonderful spending this time with you, and thank you for reaching out to our community. We look forward to working with you more in the future. Thank you so much, Caroline.
Thank you. It was an honor. And please, for everybody who is on the call, reach out on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Happy to connect further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, and thank you again, Ms. Codsi. You have inspired me to dream big and live to the end of my dreams. So hopefully I will find ways to incorporate how to help other women live to the end of their dreams as well. We appreciate your time and your messaging today. To my NASA teammates, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time. Please share with your colleagues that this session will be available on video for you to take a look at later. We do recognize the irony of the fact that this event is happening on the day that many people are taking their kids back to virtual school today. So the video will be available. There's a survey on the video when the link comes out to give us some feedback on this event and share with us your thoughts and anything that you have to share. We would love to hear what you have to say. And on behalf of the...
There's one quick thing that I forgot to say. I can't believe I forgot to say this. It's so important. The Canadian Space Agency named a female CEO last week. I just wanted to say that.
Excellent. That's excellent news. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's okay. It's okay. That is actually amazing news. So wonderful, wonderful to hear. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. And on behalf of Goddard's Women's Advisory Committee, I thank you so much for joining us again. And I hope you are now inspired to help fix the environment and not fix the women. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Love it.
Thank you.